Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation. In today's video, we're going to be replacing the radio on this 2011 Subaru Outback. Now, in this install, we're going to show you how to remove the factory radio, head over to the bench to wire up the new radio, including the wiring harness and assembly of the dash kit. Then we'll get back here and get everything reinstalled. Let's get started. Now the first thing that we need to do is get this guy on out. Now it's always a good idea to check to make sure you have discs out of the disk drive, because once the radio is removed, it's very difficult to get those out. This whole bezel is actually just held on with clips, so we have a vinyl panel removal tool which will allow us to pop everything out, and then we have a Phillips driver to remove the 4 screws holding the radio in. So we can just get started here by popping this thing loose. Alright, so with that bezel out of the way, we have our screws holding it on, 2 on each side. Alright, with the screws out of the way, the radio should come on free. Now Subaru is notorious for having really short wiring harnesses, so you have to kind of do your best to get everything unplugged. Alright, so we got that unplugged. It looks like that was your antenna harness that went all the way down there. With this up and out of the way at this point of time, we can head over to the bench to show you the parts that we're going to need to install an aftermarket radio in this location.
This video is sponsored by Crux Interfacing Solutions, an excellent location for radio replacements, camera interfaces, and more. Check out cruxinterfacing.com to start planning your next install today.
So the parts that we're going to need for Subaru today, first and foremost, is the radio we've chosen to go with. It's this dual branded doubled-in radio. This is the XDCP-A10BT. This unit features both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto for a decent budget-friendly price. Now, to accommodate this in the factory location, we'll need a dash kit, and this is the silver painted Metra 95-8903S for silver. You can get these in matte black as well. This accommodates doubled-in radios in the factory location. Now for our wiring, and since we also have steering wheel volume controls, we have the Crux SWR SU-38B. That allows us to retain those steering wheel controls while adding an aftermarket radio. And then finally, we need an antenna adapter, which is the Metra 40-SB10. So, without further ado, what we're going to do is grab the radio harness out of our box and the harness supplied by Crux, and we're going to prep those, getting those soldered up color for color, and then we will get the radio mounted in the kit. Alright, so what we've done is we grabbed our radio wiring harness that came with the radio and our Crux wiring harness adapter, and we've stripped both ends. And what we're going to do is start matching color for color. Now we put our heat shrink up and over our radio side, so when those soldered connections go, we can slide them over those connections and shrink them down with the heat gun. So what we're going to do is just start twisting them together. We'll apply some solder and make those connections. Now if you don't know how to solder or don't have the materials to do so, you can use butt connectors or crimp caps. Don't use wire nuts in an automotive application. Be sure to use something that you can crimp. So let's make those connections. Okay, so we finished soldering everything up color for color. For everything else, it's all done. What we're going to do is move our heat shrink up and over those connections, just like so. And then we'll use a heat gun and shrink the tubes. Alright, so with our heat shrink all shrunk, what we're going to do is actually wrap the harness in testa tape, just to give a little more protection in the dash. Now, we found out that the solid orange is indeed the illumination, which will see 12 volts when the headlights are on, so that we connected that to the illumination wire of our radio. The orange-white, in our instance, will not be used. Alright, so our harness is done. Good to go here. This end plugs into our radio. This end will plug into the Subaru. We have our ground out, which will connect into the ground. This goes to our steering wheel control module, which we still need to program. We left an extra red wire off. We just wired it in parallel with our accessory wire so we can power a backup camera, which we're going to do in a separate video. And then these guys hanging out. Your blue with the white stripe is your remote turn-on wire for an external amplifier. So if we had an amp down the road, it's out and available and nice and convenient. This is for our steering wheel controls. And then this is, the purple white is a backup camera trigger wire off a radio. We're going to actually be hooking this up as well, like I said, doing a backup camera, but again, in a separate video. So this is all done. Let's go ahead and program our harness. Alright, so according to our Crux instructions, since we're installing a dual branded radio, we found it here. Our configuration for our dip switch 1 through 4 is going to be off, off, on, on. So we're going to look at this here. So we're going to do off, off, on, on. 1 through 4, just like that. Now for 5 through 8, we actually have to look at the factory radio. I'm going to grab here, and it looks like this is a Panasonic. So because that's a Panasonic, let's look at our instructions here. And under Panasonic, we're going to have to do on, off, on, off. 5 through 8 is going to be on, off, on, off. So 5 is on, off, on, off. Okay, great. So this is all set and ready to go. Now, since we have a 2011 Outback, since we fall within this special note caveat, if we have a green-yellow wire across the brown wire in diagram A, if we have that wire, we need to cut the brown wire. Alright, so we would double check the car, and what it's indicating is this brown wire, if you plug in the factory harness, and on the factory harness side, it happens to be green with a yellow stripe. If that is, and it's matching up, then it says go ahead and cut the brown wire. So if we cut the brown wire, what we're going to do is just probably cut it right here. And ensure that our dip switch configuration is on, off, which we already have done. So just a quick note with steering wheel controls, if you have that configuration, Crux says go ahead and cut the wire. Alright, so with the harness all completed, at this point we need to now get the dash kit assembled up and around the radio. Alright, so we got the radio all mounted in the kit. Pretty straightforward. Sides just clip into the front bezel, and you screw it in. Put the screws on both sides. So at this point in time, with the radio and the wiring harness all done and ready to go, let's head over to the car and get everything installed. Alright, so we're ready to go. We grabbed our wiring harness. Time to get the radio back in the dash. We're going to go ahead and get that plugged on in. Make sure it's nice and tight. Plug in our ground. Just like so. Now this is your aux harness. There is an aux in the center console. We're not retaining the aux because our new radio doesn't even have an aux input anymore. So this will just chill out back behind the dash. We got our steering wheel controls all ready to go. Let's go ahead and start getting the radio installed. Alright, so before we get everything buttoned up, let's do a check to make sure everything is functioning properly. Okay, everything seems to be working okay. So, at this point of time, we can finish assembling the dash. Well, that's about it for this install. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and post great content on the channel all the time. And if you want to see more of this Outback, we actually did a backup camera install where we installed one in the hatch area and ran all the cables to this aftermarket radio. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the next video.